Release inner rage. The Stoic Guide to Mastering Your Darkest Emotion. Introduction. The fire within. There is a fire burning inside you right now. You may not feel it at this exact moment. You may have buried it so deep beneath layers of politeness, professionalism, and social conditioning that you barely recognize it anymore. But it is there. It has always been there. That fire has a name, and its name is rage. Most people are terrified of their rage. They run from it, suppress it, medicate it, or pretend it does not exist. Society has taught us that anger is dangerous, that rage is shameful, that feeling this intensity of emotion makes us somehow broken or unworthy. So we stuff it down. We smile when we want to scream. We nod when we want to fight. We stay silent when everything inside us is erupting like a volcano that has been sealed shut for far too long. But here is what nobody tells you. That suppressed rage does not disappear. It does not dissolve quietly into the night. It transforms. It mutates into anxiety, depression, physical illness, broken relationships, and a hollow emptiness that no amount of success or distraction can fill. The rage you refuse to face becomes the invisible prison you live inside every single day. This channel exists to help you break free. If this content resonates with you, subscribe to this YouTube channel right now and join a community of people committed to mastering themselves from the inside out. The Stoic view on anger. The ancient Stoics were not emotionless robots. This is the most common and most damaging misconception about Stoic philosophy. People hear the word Stoic and immediately picture a cold, detached individual who feels nothing, cares about nothing, and moves through life like a stone statue untouched by human experience. That image could not be further from the truth. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers and arguably the most powerful man who ever lived, wrote extensively about his own struggles with anger. He wrestled with frustration, disappointment, and the burning desire to respond to betrayal with fury. He was deeply human, and he knew that what made him extraordinary was not the absence of those feelings but his relentless commitment to understanding them. The Stoics taught something radical for their time. They believed that emotions like anger were not problems to be eliminated but signals to be examined. Every surge of rage carries information. It is pointing at something. A violated value, an unmet need, a boundary that has been crossed, a wound that has never healed. The wise person does not ignore that signal. The wise person sits with it, studies it, and uses it as a lantern to illuminate the darker corners of the self. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and much of our rage operates the same way. It feeds on stories we tell ourselves, narratives we construct about who wronged us and why, and those stories grow larger and more monstrous the longer we avoid looking at them directly. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and keep watching because we are just getting started. Why you are so angry. Before you can release your inner rage, you need to understand where it actually comes from. Anger does not arise randomly. It is not a malfunction. It is a response. Every human being on this planet has a nervous system that is wired for survival, and anger is one of the most ancient and powerful tools in that survival toolkit. When our ancestors faced a predator, when their food was stolen, when their family was threatened, anger gave them the burst of energy and focus needed to fight back and survive. Anger saved lives. Anger built civilizations. Anger drove human beings to stand up against injustice and demand something better. The problem is that the modern world has created an environment completely mismatched with that ancient wiring. Your nervous system cannot distinguish between a physical threat and a passive-aggressive email from your coworker. It cannot tell the difference between a lion charging at you and a traffic jam making you late for an important meeting. The same biological machinery that helped your ancestors survive is now firing constantly in response to frustrations, disappointments, and perceived disrespect that have nothing to do with physical survival. So you walk around in a body that is chronically braced for battle in a world that demands you smile and stay calm. That internal contradiction creates pressure. And pressure, when it has nowhere to go, becomes rage. Add to this the wounds that many people carry from childhood. The father who was never proud enough. The mother who was never present enough. The bullying that nobody stopped. The dreams that were crushed before they had a chance to breathe. These early experiences wire the nervous system for a kind of hypervigilance that persists long into adulthood. You learned early that the world was not always safe, and your rage became your armor. The danger of suppression. Let us talk honestly about what happens when you keep stuffing that rage down. Most people believe that suppressing anger is the mature, responsible thing to do. They believe that keeping their emotions tightly controlled is a sign of strength. And in certain situations, choosing not to react impulsively is absolutely the right call. But there is a massive difference between choosing not to react and pretending the emotion does not exist. When you suppress rage chronically, over months and years, it does not just sit there quietly. Research in psychoneuroimmunology has shown that chronically suppressed negative emotions are linked to elevated cortisol levels, compromised immune function, cardiovascular disease, and a range of other serious physical health problems. Your body keeps the score. Every time you swallow that rage instead of processing it properly, your body stores it somewhere. Emotionally, chronic suppression leads to a kind of deadening. You stop feeling the intense negative emotions, but you also gradually lose access to the intense positive ones. Joy becomes muted, passion fades, enthusiasm feels forced and hollow. You become a smaller version of yourself, living in a carefully managed emotional cage of your own construction. Relationally, suppressed rage leaks. It comes out as sarcasm, coldness, passive aggression, sudden explosions over small things, and a general atmosphere of tension that everyone around you can feel even if nobody names it. The people you love most often bear the weight of the anger you have been refusing to acknowledge all day, all week, all year. And psychologically, unprocessed rage often turns inward. It becomes self-criticism, shame, self-sabotage, and in its darkest forms, depression. The anger you were afraid to direct outward gets redirected at the only target you have complete access to, yourself. Subscribe to this YouTube channel right now if you are ready to stop that cycle. The difference between expression and release. Here is where a lot of people get confused and where a lot of popular advice actually makes things worse. There is a widespread belief that the way to release anger is to express it, scream into a pillow. Hit a punching bag, yell it out. Vent to your friends until the pressure subsides. And while some of these approaches can provide temporary relief, research has consistently shown that venting anger in this way often reinforces it rather than releasing it. You are essentially practicing being angry, strengthening the neural pathways associated with that state, making it easier and more habitual to go there in the future. True release is something fundamentally different. True release is not about discharging the energy of anger outward. It is about transforming it at a deeper level. It is about going beneath the surface emotion to find the vulnerable feeling underneath it, the fear, the grief, the shame, the love that did not know where to go. It is about metabolizing the experience rather than just moving the energy around. This distinction changes everything about how you approach your inner rage. Instead of asking how do I get rid of this feeling, you start asking what is this feeling trying to tell me. Instead of treating your rage like an enemy to be defeated, you begin treating it like a messenger to be heard. The Stoics understood this. When Marcus Aurelius was provoked by someone's cruelty or foolishness, he did not suppress his reaction and he did not erupt in retaliation. He paused. He examined the situation. He asked what role he played, what was actually in his control, and what response would align with his deepest values. That pause was not weakness. That pause was the most powerful thing a human being can do. The body holds the rage. One of the most important things you need to understand about releasing inner rage is that it is not just a mental process. Your rage is not only in your mind. It lives in your body. It lives in the tightness in your jaw that you carry around all day without realizing it. It lives in the tension across your shoulders that never fully releases. It lives in the shallow, restricted breathing that has become your baseline. It lives in the chronically elevated state of readiness that your nervous system has adopted as its default setting. You cannot think your way out of a somatic experience. You cannot intellectualize your body into releasing tension that has been stored for years. The body needs to be engaged directly, through movement, through breath, through sensation, through the kind of physical practices that give the nervous system a pathway back to safety and regulation. This is why physical exercise is so profoundly important for people carrying significant inner rage. Not because it distracts you from the emotion, but because it provides the body with the completion cycle that was interrupted when you swallowed that rage instead of acting on it. Your body needed to do something with that energy. When you exercise with real intensity, you give it the outlet it has been waiting for. This is also why breath work is one of the most powerful tools available for emotional regulation. The breath is unique among bodily functions in that it operates both automatically and consciously. By deliberately changing your breathing pattern, you can directly influence your nervous system state, shifting from sympathetic activation to parasympathetic calm in a matter of minutes. Learning to work with your breath is learning to work with the very foundation of your emotional experience. The root: unmet needs and violated values. Every explosion of rage, every simmering resentment, every flash of fury, can be traced back to one of two things: an unmet need or a violated value. When you understand this, you begin to see your anger with completely different eyes. Unmet needs are exactly what they sound like: the need for safety, the need for respect, the need for love, belonging, recognition, autonomy, fairness, or consistency. Human beings are wired with these needs at a deep biological and psychological level, and when they go unmet consistently, the result is distress. That distress often manifests as anger because anger is activating. It moves us toward doing something about the situation. It is the emotion of change, of boundaries, of demanding better. Violated values work similarly. You have a deep internal sense of how things should be, how people should treat each other. What is fair? What is right? When reality violates that internal framework persistently and severely, rage is the natural response. Your outrage at injustice is not a character flaw. It is the voice of your deepest values refusing to be silent. The practice here is one of translation. When you feel rage rising, instead of reacting or suppressing, you pause and ask, what need is not being met right now? What value is being violated? What is the real message underneath this emotion? This inquiry does not make the anger disappear immediately, but it transforms your relationship to it. You stop being swept away by the surface wave and begin to sense the deeper currents beneath it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel because every week we go deeper into these transformative practices. Stoic practices for releasing inner rage. Now let us get practical. Here are some of the most powerful Stoic-inspired practices for working with and releasing inner rage. The first practice is the pause. The ancient Stoics called this the gap between stimulus and response. Something happens, someone says something, a situation unfolds in a way you did not want, and there is a moment, however brief, between that external event and your internal reaction. In that moment lives your freedom. The practice is simply to find that gap and widen it, to cultivate the ability to pause before responding, not to suppress what you are feeling, but to create enough space to choose your response consciously rather than being carried away automatically. The second practice is journaling. Marcus Aurelius did not write his meditations for publication. He wrote them for himself, as a daily practice of self-examination and course correction. He would write honestly about his failures, his frustrations, his fears, and his aspirations. He used writing as a way to externalize and examine his inner world rather than being unconsciously driven by it. When you write about your rage, you create distance from it. You move from being inside the experience to being able to look at it from the outside. The third practice is perspective taking. The Stoics were masters of this. When someone angers you, ask yourself, what is their story? What wounds and fears might be driving their behavior? This is not about excusing harmful behavior. It is about loosening the grip of righteous indignation long enough to respond wisely rather than react blindly. The fourth practice is the view from above. Imagine your current situation from a great height, from the perspective of your future self looking back years from now, or even from the perspective of a vast universe in which human affairs are tiny and brief. This shift in perspective does not minimize your experience, but it does give it context, and context can dissolve the urgency that makes rage feel all-consuming. Anger as teacher. What if your inner rage is actually one of your greatest teachers? This idea might sound strange at first. We are conditioned to view anger as something to overcome, to move past, to leave behind on the road to becoming a better person. But what if that framing is backwards? What if anger is not an obstacle on the path but the path itself? Every time you feel significant anger, you are being given specific information about what matters most to you. You are being shown where your values live, where your wounds are, where your growth edge is located. The anger is a map. Most people throw the map away because they are afraid of what it might reveal. Think about the things that make you most angry. Really think about them. The situations, the types of people, the specific behaviors that reliably provoke your strongest reactions. There is a pattern there, and that pattern is pointing at something important. Maybe it is a recurring experience of not being seen or valued. Maybe it is a deep sensitivity to unfairness rooted in early experiences where you were genuinely treated unjustly. Maybe it is a vision of how things could be, a standard of excellence or integrity, that keeps colliding with the mediocrity and carelessness you encounter in the world. Your rage is not random. It is specific, and its specificity is a gift if you are willing to unwrap it. The people who have made the greatest positive impact in the world were almost always driven by a very particular anger. An anger at injustice, at suffering that did not need to exist, at systems that crushed human potential. They did not suppress that anger and they did not let it destroy them. They transmuted it, they alchemized it into purpose, into action, into a life devoted to something larger than their own comfort. The relationship between rage and grief. This is perhaps the most important and least discussed aspect of working with inner rage. Beneath almost every significant anger is a layer of grief. Rage is often what grief looks like when it does not feel safe to be vulnerable. When something is lost, when someone disappoints you deeply, when a hope is shattered, when love turns cold, the first response is often not sadness but fury. Fury is active. It pushes outward. It creates a sense of power and agency in the face of something that felt powerless and devastating. But underneath that fury, if you are willing to go there, is the raw tenderness of a heart that cared deeply and got hurt. This is why working with inner rage almost always involves, at some point, encountering grief. And this is where many people stop. They will do the anger work. They will explore their rage, understand its origins, examine it with Stoic clarity. But when the grief beneath it begins to surface, they retreat back into the anger because anger feels stronger and safer than the vulnerability of true sorrow. But you cannot fully release the rage without moving through the grief. The grief is where the healing lives. It is where you acknowledge what was actually lost, what actually hurt, what you actually needed and did not receive. It is where you stop armoring yourself against the reality of your own woundedness and allow yourself to be fully human. This does not mean drowning in sadness. It means giving your authentic emotional experience its moment to be witnessed, by yourself, with the same compassion you would offer a dear friend. The role of forgiveness. Let us have an honest conversation about forgiveness, because it is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the entire landscape of emotional healing. Forgiveness is not condoning what happened to you. It is not pretending the harm was not real or that the person who caused it does not bear responsibility. It is not a gift you give to someone who hurt you. It is not something that can be forced or rushed or performed for social approval. Forgiveness is, at its deepest level, the decision to stop letting the past determine your present. It is the act of taking back the energy you have been spending on maintaining your grievance and redirecting that energy toward your own life, your own healing, your own becoming. The Stoics understood that holding on to resentment is a form of letting someone live rent-free in your mind. Every moment you spend rehearsing what was done to you, building the case against the person who wronged you, feeding the story of your victimization, is a moment that belongs to them. It is a moment stolen from your own presence, your own peace, your own power. This does not mean you have to reconcile with people who have harmed you. Forgiveness and reconciliation are entirely separate things. You can forgive someone completely and still choose to have nothing to do with them for the rest of your life. The forgiveness is for you, not for them. It is the internal act of releasing a grip that has been costing you more than you realize. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and keep showing up for yourself every single day. Building a new relationship with intensity. Here is a reframe that can change everything. What if the intensity that expresses itself as rage in one context is the same intensity that, channeled correctly, becomes passion, creativity, drive, and unstoppable determination? High-functioning, deeply impactful people are almost never low-intensity people. They feel things deeply. They care fiercely. They are moved by beauty and enraged by injustice and ecstatic in moments of connection and devastated by loss. That range and depth of feeling is not a problem. It is a profound asset. The question is never how do I become less intense but rather how do I learn to work with this intensity skillfully. When you suppress your rage, you are not just suppressing rage. You are suppressing the underlying intensity that is your greatest strength. You are dimming the very quality that makes you capable of extraordinary engagement with life. The goal is not to become calmer in the sense of feeling less. The goal is to become more regulated, meaning you develop the capacity to move through intense emotional states without being destructively overwhelmed by them. You feel everything, but you are no longer at the mercy of everything you feel. That is mastery. That is what the Stoics were pointing at, not numbness but equanimity. Not the absence of the storm but the capacity to remain centered in its midst. Practical daily rituals for emotional mastery. Building real emotional mastery is not about having one profound insight. It is about consistent daily practice, small habits repeated over time until they become the architecture of a new way of being. Begin your morning with 5 minutes of intentional breath work before you look at your phone. Before the world gets its hooks into you, before the demands and the provocations and the noise begin, you take 5 minutes to regulate your nervous system, to set your internal compass, to remind yourself who you are and what you are committed to that day. Spend time each evening in brief reflection, not spiraling into self-criticism, but honest, compassionate review. Where did you lose your center today? What triggered you and why? What would you do differently? What did you handle well that you want to acknowledge and reinforce? This daily practice of reflection is what the Stoics called the evening review, and it is one of the most powerful tools for gradual, sustainable character development. Move your body with intention and intensity every single day, not necessarily for hours, but with real presence and real effort. Give your body the outlet it needs. Let your physical practice be an act of respect for the incredible, complex, emotional organism that you are. Create boundaries that honor your values. Many people carry chronic rage because they have spent years saying yes when they meant no, tolerating things that violate their core values, and then wondering why they feel so perpetually frustrated. Rage is often the voice of your authentic self screaming to be respected. Listen to it, let it show you where you need to draw clearer lines. The community of inner work. You are not doing this alone. One of the most isolating aspects of carrying significant inner rage is the belief that you are uniquely broken, that your darkness is somehow more extensive or more shameful than other people's, that if anyone could really see what is happening inside you they would recoil in horror. This belief keeps you isolated, and isolation makes everything worse. The truth is that everyone is carrying something. Every person you walk past on the street, every colleague, every family member, every person presenting a confident and composed exterior to the world, is navigating their own inner weather. The specifics differ, but the basic human experience of struggling with intense and difficult emotions is utterly universal. When you find a community of people who are committed to doing this work, who are honest about their struggles and courageous in their pursuit of growth, something remarkable happens. The shame dissolves. The isolation lifts. You discover that your most difficult experiences, far from making you an outsider, are actually your most profound point of connection with other human beings. This is what this channel is building. A community of people who refuse the shallow comfort of pretending everything is fine. Who are willing to go into the difficult places, to face the inner dragons, to do the real work of becoming who they actually have the capacity to be. Subscribe to this YouTube channel right now and become part of this community. Leave a comment below and tell us what is one thing you are working on releasing. You will be amazed by what you find there. When rage becomes fuel, let us talk about the transformation that becomes possible when you have done enough of this work. On the other side of suppressed, unexamined, destructive rage is something extraordinary. It is a kind of clarified, directed intensity that the ancient world called thymos, a spirited quality of soul that drives human beings toward excellence, justice, and meaningful action. It is the fire, purified of the debris of old wounds and unconscious reactivity, burning clean and bright in service of something genuinely worth burning for. When you have done the work of examining your rage, understanding its roots, grieving what needed to be grieved, forgiving what could be forgiven, and setting boundaries where boundaries were needed, you do not become a milder, more docile version of yourself. You become more fully, powerfully, authentically yourself. The same intensity that was tearing you apart from the inside becomes the engine of your greatest contributions. Athletes know this. Artists know this. Activists know this. The greatest performances, the most extraordinary creative works, the most impactful social change movements, have nearly always been fueled by a transmuted intensity, by people who felt things deeply and learned to direct that depth towards something magnificent. Your rage, properly understood and skillfully worked with, is not your enemy. It is one of the most potent raw materials you possess for building a life of genuine power, purpose, and meaning. What Stoicism actually demands of you. At this point it is worth being very direct about what this path actually requires. Stoic philosophy is not a self-help trend. It is not a collection of motivational quotes to screenshot and post. It is a demanding, lifelong practice of rigorous self-examination, radical personal responsibility, and unwavering commitment to virtue in the classical sense of excellence of character. What Stoicism actually demands is that you stop blaming. Not because others are never at fault, but because the moment you locate the source of your suffering exclusively in external circumstances or other people's behavior, you have given away your power. You have made your peace, your growth, and your healing conditional on things that are not in your control. The Stoics were ruthlessly clear about this. The only thing ever fully in your control is your own thoughts, judgments, and chosen responses. Everything else is, to varying degrees, outside your control. What Stoicism demands is that you face yourself honestly. Not the curated version of yourself that you present to the world, but the actual interior landscape, the jealousy and the vanity and the fear and the rage and the smallness that coexist alongside your genuine goodness and your real strengths. The Stoics were not interested in feeling good about themselves. They were interested in actually being good, and that project begins with unflinching honesty. What Stoicism demands is that you keep showing up, especially when it is hard. Especially when you fail. Especially when the old patterns reassert themselves and you find yourself back in the grip of the very reactions you thought you had transcended. The practice is not about achieving a permanent state of perfection. It is about getting back on the path, every single time, with as much grace and as little self-judgment as you can manage. Letters to your rage. One of the most powerful practices for working directly with inner rage is to write a letter to it, not about it, but to address it directly. Treat it as a part of yourself that has been trying to help you in the only way it knows how. Because that is exactly what it is. Start by acknowledging it. Tell your rage that you see it, that you know it has been with you for a long time. That you understand it came into being for a reason, perhaps to protect you, Perhaps to motivate you, perhaps to ensure that something important was never dismissed or forgotten. Give it the acknowledgement it has been demanding through its increasingly disruptive behavior. Then ask it what it needs you to know. What is the core message it has been trying to deliver all this time? What situation, what relationship, what unresolved wound is it standing over like a sentinel, refusing to let you move past until the real issue has been addressed? Then make a promise. Not that you will make the feeling go away, but that you will take its message seriously. That you will address the underlying need or wound it has been pointing at. That you will not dismiss it or bury it again. This practice sounds simple. It is not done with genuine intention and honesty. It can open doors to self-understanding that years of conventional therapy sometimes cannot reach. Because you are not analyzing your anger from the outside. You are entering into relationship with it from the inside. The long game. Everything we have discussed in this exploration requires a perspective that is increasingly rare in our instant gratification culture. It requires the willingness to play the long game. Real emotional transformation does not happen in a weekend workshop. It does not happen after reading a single book or watching a single video. It happens through years of consistent practice, of falling down and getting back up, of making gradual progress that is sometimes so slow you cannot perceive it in real time but reveals itself dramatically when you look back from a distance. The Stoics thought in terms of a lifetime of practice. Marcus Aurelius was emperor for nearly 2 decades and wrote his meditations throughout that period, returning again and again to the same themes, the same struggles, the same commitments. He did not write about achieving mastery. He wrote about the daily, imperfect, earnest attempt to practice it. That humility, that willingness to be a perpetual student of his own character, is perhaps the most stoic thing about him. You are in this for the long haul. Some days will feel like breakthroughs. Some days will feel like complete regression. Both are part of the process. Both are exactly what is supposed to happen. The commitment is not to always feel better. The commitment is to always be honest, to always keep practicing, to always choose the harder and more authentic path over the easier and more comfortable one. A final word. You are not your rage. As we bring this exploration toward its close, there is one thing above all else that deserves to be said clearly and directly. You are not your rage. The anger you carry is part of your experience. It has shaped you. It has driven you. It has protected you in ways you may not fully appreciate. But it is not your identity. It is not the deepest truth of who you are. Beneath the rage, beneath the armor, beneath all the accumulated pain and reactivity of a human life lived in an imperfect world, there is something that has never been touched by any of it. The Stoics called it the ruling faculty, the hegemonikon, the core of rational, free consciousness that observes all experience without being ultimately defined by any of it. This is the part of you that can witness your own rage without being consumed by it. This is the part of you that can choose, in the moment when everything feels most reactive and least free, to pause, to breathe, to ask what truly serves here. Connecting with that deeper self is the real work. Everything else, the practices, the journaling, the breath work, the Stoic philosophy, is simply scaffolding in service of that connection. Once that connection is established and progressively deepened, everything changes. Not because the external world becomes easier but because you become bigger than it. Not because the difficult emotions stop arising but because you develop the capacity to hold them, learn from them, and transmute them into wisdom and strength. You have everything you need to do this work. You have more than you know. Subscribe and join the journey. If this content has moved something in you, if it has touched a truth that you have been circling around without quite being able to name, then you are exactly where you are meant to be. Subscribe to this YouTube channel right now. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Share this with someone in your life who is carrying their own inner fire and does not yet have the language or the framework to work with it. Leave a comment below and tell this community what resonated most, what you are releasing, what you are stepping into. This channel is dedicated to one thing above all others: helping real people do the real work of becoming more fully, freely, and powerfully themselves. Not the Instagram version of personal growth. The actual thing. The hard, beautiful, transformative, ongoing practice of showing up for your own life with complete honesty and complete commitment. The fire inside you is not your enemy. It is your invitation. Release it, master it, let it illuminate the path ahead. Subscribe now, the best is yet to come. Drop a comment below. What is one thing you are releasing today?